So I don't know about you, but I'm getting sick and tired of hearing about flu. Here a flu, there a flu, everywhere a flu. It just seems to be all I keep hearing about. All I keep hearing about. Even past COVID, even past the pandemic, we're still talking about it. You know, they keep hyping up this, mass takeover of all these different pathogens and diseases. It was monkeypox, and then RSV, and then worried about kids, and then worried about this, and now this avian flu that's made an outbreak. And when we've been discussing about avian flu, we uncovered a lot of sinister ploys that has nothing to do with medicine, has nothing to do with medical science, has nothing to do with the avian flu. And that's why they're continuously going after, like the Universal Ostrich Farm that we covered extensively. They're going after precious ostriches, not because they're worried about avian flu outbreak, because even if they had the avian flu, they were able to immunize themselves. And scientists are studying on these ostriches to look at antibodies, to look at therapeutics, to look at how they were naturally immunized by the avian flu strain. And instead of doing the actual research and investigations, the CFIA, which is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and the RCMP and the federal government are coordinating together to attack these ostriches and hunt them down. So we know this is not about avian flu. This is not about protecting people. And there's something more sinister at foot when it comes to the whole avian flu outbreak and the paranoia and the going after farms and culling a bunch of birds. And this is an example of it. So from the CBC, 4 poultry farms in southwestern Ontario hit with avian flu, resulting in 63,000 birds culled so far. The farms are located in the same area with authorities implementing strict rules to stop the spread. Now, the thing I've pointed out consistently since the start of this avian flu outbreak is that you notice that all the attention, all the inquiries, all the action to all the culling of animals are directed primarily at chickens, ostriches, and cattle. If you're worried about avian flu outbreak, if you're worried about bird flu, wouldn't you be worried about seagulls? Wouldn't you be worried about pigeons or ducks or Canadian geese? They are a national bird. Like, aren't you worried about them spreading bird flu to certain areas? But no, they're going after poultry, ostriches, which we don't consume, but they're going after the ostriches at Universal Ostrich Farm and Katie Pasitny because they're doing scientific studies, and they're going after cattle for avian flu. And two of those animals are highly consumed within the human diet. Do you tell me if there's something a bit more sinister afoot than just trying to prevent avian flu outbreaks? And also, avian flu has been around for many years. There was an outbreak 20 years ago, in fact, of an avian flu strain that they didn't go to this level. And we're going to talk about that later on. But here in the article, it says the Canadian Food Inspection Agency says it has identified additional outbreaks of avian influenza in Strathroyd, Ontario, bringing the total number declared in the last 2 weeks to 4. The most recent outbreak was uncovered Friday after the highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI, was confirmed at a commercial poultry farm in the region, the CFIA said on its website. Funny. So a commercial poultry farm had this massive outbreak of 4. And that's why they got to kill thousands and thousands of chickens. Highly consumable protein in average human diets. They're not worried about pigeons. They're not worried about crows. Don't you think they'd be passing on these pathogens? Don't you think they're carrying a bunch of viruses and diseases? But they'll go after poultries at a commercial farm. It's not yet clear. It's not clear yet how many birds may be affected by the most recent outbreak. It comes 2 days after an outbreak was declared on Wednesday, affecting at least 15,469 turkeys, the CFI said in a statement. The CFI did not provide the name or exact location of the affected farm in that outbreak, but said it was about 5 kilometers from the 2 farms impacted in outbreaks last week and earlier this week. So the CFIA that we know is deeply corrupted, deeply corrupted. They won't release the information about where these turkeys had the outbreak, but they're also confirming that it's the location where 2 other farms are nearby, and that's why we got to call them. Those 2 earlier outbreaks affected nearly 32,000 turkeys and 15,600 turkeys, respectively, according to the CFIA, bringing the total number of birds impacted to at least 63,000, a number that will increase with Friday's outbreak. Again, it's sinister. It's sinister what is happening here. And they're just going commercial farm to commercial farm to slaughter these birds. And like I said, the biggest giveaway that made me realize how stupid this was, that's pretty obvious to people, is that if you're concerned about avian flu, why are they not testing ducks? Why are they not testing geese? Why are they not testing pigeons, doves, blue jays, cardinals? How many different birds out there that are going day to day and could be passing on these pathogens? Aren't you worried about that? Oh, that's right, because it's not about the avian flu. It's not about the avian flu. It's about controlling the food. It's about agricultural control. They're using avian flu as a means to cull the production of meats, of poultry, of cattle, of beef. Because these are the same nefarious people that are telling you gotta stop eating beef because of cow farts. The emissions that are going to pollute into the air. The same people that ride private jets and call down a rainforest to have meetings about the climate. You can't eat birds. You can't eat chicken. You can't eat beef. You have to add this synthetic goo and a bunch of bugs and get into line and know nothing. That's what you're getting from this. And the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, is deeply corrupted to this. Deeply corrupted to this. That's why they're going after ostriches at Universal Ostrich Farm in BC when they know that the ostriches are not made for consumption. So why would the Food Inspection Agency be involved in this? Why would they be involved in hunting and killing ostriches that are not made for food? Exactly that point. Here's another article. This is from Global News. 18 poultry farms in BC dealing with avian flu outbreaks. And like I said, 20 years ago, to this day, there was an avian flu outbreak. 20 years ago. With less resources, less technology, less understanding. And they didn't do this massive cull. They didn't go around and start slaughtering a bunch of animals. They didn't track down farms. They didn't do a hijacking of agricultural land. So what makes 20 years ago different than today? Why do they need to go down this path? You have the technology, you have the advancement and understanding from avian flu strains that happened previously. Wouldn't you think you'd be better off not to do this and actually study the avian flu strains? Oh, that's right, because it's not about the flu. It's not about stopping this virus. Just like how all the measures, when it came to COVID, the pandemic, the lockdowns, it was not about COVID. It was never about treating people with COVID. It was about controlling you. You had to shut down your business. You had to lose your livelihood. You had to see your grandma die in vain without her loved ones. You were in control. You were under the control of this nefarious tyrannical government. It was never about stopping the flu. It was never about stopping COVID. And that was the whole point from the get-go by professional doctors who have studied time and time on this virus. And just like the avian flu, COVID derived from 20 years ago, but prior to that, a little thing called SARS. Remember that outbreak in Toronto where they had an ability to stop the spread? They isolated a bunch of hospitals and different places that had the strain. And in a matter of months, they had a rock concert with 500,000 people showing up. In a few months. And yet, we had to go year to year with this COVID nonsense. That's how sinister this is. That's how sinister it is. That 20 years ago, we had similar strains with less restrictions and more positive outcomes than we do now. That's what makes me angry. That's what makes me frustrated. And that's why I'm not going to be leaving up on this. I know people want me to shut up and move on from COVID and move on from mentioning about this. Oh, I don't want to hear the horrors of 2020 all over again. But guess what? It's still happening, folks. And I'm devastated. I'm devastated because of the impact I went through, the impacts that other people went through. People lost their lives. People lost their lives in the last few years because of this nonsense. And now it's affecting food, which is going to affect you. So, remember I said 20 years ago? So, this is an article. Avian flu viruses in Canada, not dangerous, officials say. When was this written? This was November 21st, 2005. So, 20 years ago, there was an avian flu outbreak of birds and animals in Canada. It started in Asia, and they found strains among Canadian wildlife. Did they do the massive culling that they did? No. In fact, they did the opposite. They researched these birds, they took them in, they diagnosed them, and they did proper medical testing. We didn't do that now. And you think we would do that now with better understanding. You think with all the technology, all the resources, all the materials, all the years we've been studying avian flu and respiratory illnesses, you would think we'd have a better understanding and a better prediction on how to deal with this. But no, absolutely not. Because big pharmaceuticals came in and bought out the entire system and told you you're basically a slave now. You surrender your will to us. So, just a little bit of this here. I'm not going to go through all of it because it's a lengthy article. But it says, Canadian officials said yesterday that they would destroy all the poultry on a British Columbia farm where a duck was found to be carrying a low pathogenic H5 avian influenza virus. That announcement came 2 days after the Canadian government reported the identification of a low pathogen strain of H5N1 virus in wild birds in Manitoba and other flu viruses in wild birds in British Columbia and Quebec. Officials said none of the viruses are considered dangerous to humans or highly pathogenic for birds, despite its name. The H5N1 virus found in 2 ducks in Manitoba is unrelated to the H5N1 virus plaguing poultry and sickening some humans in Asia, they said. I want to euthanize the H5N1 subtype detected in Manitoba is completely distinct from the strain currently presented in Asia. The Canadian press quoted Dr. Brian Evans, Canada's chief veterinarian officer, as saying, Dr. Arlene King, head of the respiratory diseases for the Public Health Agency of Canada said the H5N1 strain found in Manitoba birds has been previously in North America, according to the CP. So again, these strains, this avian flu, has been around for quite a long time. Quite a long time. So why now is there such a giant outbreak that they have to basically go into farms and slaughter all their animals? Why do they have to do a massive purge on innocent birds that are proven to be safe, that aren't contagious, that don't have the strains? Because it's not about protecting people. They don't care about protecting people. They don't care if you get sick. They don't care if you die. They care about control. And the other thing that makes me lean in this direction, I know it sounds conspiratorial. I know it sounds crazy to think that why would the Canadian government kill off poultry and cattle farms to control the food supply? Well, that goes on the heels of this that were reported recently. Cloned meat enters the market, but you never know. So 3D printed meats, synthetics, chemicals are mass producing to make it look like beef and poultry and other foods at grocery stores. And now Health Canada and the federal government just gave a rubber stamp to this initiative without any difference in labeling. So meaning that the next time you go to a grocery store and pick up ground beef or chicken, or maybe you want steak for tonight, you don't know if it's an actual animal or if it's synthetic. That's why I lean into the direction of how sinister this culling of animals is, because now, we're killing a bunch of poultry, we're killing a bunch of chickens and turkeys and ostriches and beef and this and that. Well, good news, because now you're going to get synthetics. It's going to be safer, apparently, because, the avian flu is going to affect you. We can't tell you why or how, and we don't have the science to prove it, but they're going to lean to this direction. So, here's this guy. This guy, FAFO Farms from Texas, it says. If you haven't been paying attention yesterday, after battling months in court, the Canadian government gave the go-ahead to slaughter hundreds of healthy birds under the guise of bird flu. If the birds haven't been really sick, or BF was as bad, bird flu was as bad as they said those birds would have been dead a long time ago. Instead, they destroyed these beautiful animals instead of using them for research. Exactly. Those ostriches were being used for research. And the CFIA and the RCMP completely destroyed the research. That's what they were doing there. They're killing the animals so it disrupts the research, that people wouldn't have a better understanding of avian flu. This is all about control, ladies and gentlemen. Here in the States, on November 5th, it became mandatory to use RFID tags on all breeding age cows under the guise of being able to track bird flu. The USDA already called hundreds of millions of chickens because one tested positive in the flock, even though the rest of the flock was healthy. This isn't paranoia. This is paying attention. Exactly. This is about them using fear-mongering, using paranoia tactics to scare people into submission for their evil doings. They want to take control of agriculture, to push synthetic meat, to push 3D printed lab-grown meats to you, the consumer, to choke it down. And you wouldn't realize it because all they kept flashing is avian flu. We're saving you. We're saving you. Avian flu is going to affect you somehow. You don't know how, you don't know when, you don't know anything. You're not allowed to know anything. Don't do your research, but we're saving you by doing this. That's what they're claiming. Here's MJ Truth Ultra saying, holy yes, they're trying to do it again. Deborah Bricks wants to test millions of cows weekly and dairy workers for asymptomatic symptoms using PCR testing. The greatest trick the CDC ever pulled was convince people they were sick without showing any symptoms. So they're replaying COVID. That's what's happening here. They're redoing everything we did wrong with COVID. And now they're using bird flu as the example. They're testing humans for bird flu. It's so sinister. It's so sinister that they're doing this. But again, this is all about control. This is all about control. It's not about preventing illnesses or diseases, some of which were probably created by them. Because we know about gain of function. We know about how they create these viral outbreaks so that they then later on could create the cure for it. But they try to longevate it to make people sicker, to make people weaker, so they take more control over them. That is how sinister all these eugenics, all this leads to. And here is Dr. Deborah Bricks, who's the former Trump White House coronavirus response coordinator. So everything they did wrong with COVID, you would think that they would learn their lessons and not repeat the same mistakes. No, she wants to repeat them over again. Listen to this.
That we're not testing to really see how many people have been exposed and got asymptomatically infected. We should be testing every cow weekly. You can do pooled PCR. We have the technology. The great thing about America is we're incredibly innovative, and we have the ability to have these.
I love that. I love how she says that. We're so innovative. We have all this technology, but we're going to repeat the same mistake we did the last time. You know, instead of actually being innovative, to research the birds, to research the cattle, to maybe do some medical studies to see whether or not they are sick or ill. But we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to do shameless testing. We're going to force farmers to do PCR testing on their cattle, on themselves, and anyone else, just so we can get further control of their bodily autonomy. Wow. But we're so innovative. We're so innovative.
Breakthroughs. We could be pool testing every dairy worker. I do believe that there's undetected cases in humans because we're once again only tracking people with symptoms. When we did that with COVID, the virus spread throughout the Northeast undetected because it took a long time to get to the vulnerable individuals. But in the meantime, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were infected with asymptomatic or mild disease and never came to medical attention. We have to switch from symptoms to actually definitive laboratory testing. We have the capacity.
So it sounds like to me that she's very, very anxious and hoping that they can use this testing to then further fearmonger people to say, look, see, it's affecting humans. That's why we need to do this lockdown again. That's why we got to do the pandemic over again. That's why the WHO came up with that great idea. The WHO, World Health Organization, came up with the idea that if we have another pandemic, knock, knock, if we have another pandemic, that we could take control over countries. That we get to decide the fate. We get to decide your destiny. We get to decide over you and your body. So hopefully this PCR, because we have so much innovation. We have so much innovation. Just not enough to actually resort to actual medical science. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a professional. But I can tell you that is insanely crazy. That's insanely crazy. We have so much innovation, but we're going to repeat the same mistakes we did over and over again. Because it's not about protecting people. About control. And here to remind you about this is an actual doctor, Dr. Peter McCullough, well regarded across North America, part of the wellness group. I learned about him during, my opening when it came to COVID, and Dr. Ron Malone and so many other people, Dr. Pierre Corey as well, exposing this. And here he is about to expose the whole avian flu outbreak and how this is a means of just further control. Listen to this.
Expect with the bird flu round. Is this going to be worse? What do you expect to come?
It's game on for gain-of-function bird flu. That is disease X. Gavi called it, the Global Vaccine Alliance. They were right. Bird flu is disease X. It's been around for decades. It has a mortality rate of about 52% in over 800 cases. It has in years past no ICU care, very late presentations, undernourished people. It's a different game now in humans. We've got antivirals, antibiotics. We shouldn't lose a single case, but we now have a human case reported today in Michigan, or one in Australia, previously one in Texas, one in Colorado. We haven't seen human-to-human spread, but it's clearly spreading animal to human. There's animal outbreaks now all over. We learned that it's gain-of-function research, CLADE, which is the original source 23446. It's coming out of the USDA Athens, Georgia Poultry Research Center. And I tell you, it's a man-made problem. They tried to do gain-of-function research through serial passage. They got it into mallard ducks. There must have been some ducks that escaped. And now it's game on for bird flu. I predict it's going to create a lot of constraints in the food supply. They're going to end up culling animals, unnecessarily destroying chickens and cattle. They can just let them get through it, get natural immunity, but they don't want to do that. I predict they're going to mass vaccinate the animals, which the U.S. has refrained on because it makes it worse.
So that's Dr. Peter McCullough, well-regarded cardiologist, top of the chain, top of his field, just revealed the big picture of this, that this is gain of function, meaning it's a man-made concoction, this virus, that they're spreading to animals so they can create a vaccine to give to these animals, the same animals that they're putting the disease on, and it's going to control the food supply. And now they're saying that because they have predicted these outbreaks occurring to a couple of human beings, that they could further push the goalpost and no longer be concerned just about chickens and poultry and beef, but they can further move the goalpost to recreate the exact same scenarios we did with COVID. This is all about control. This is all about control. This is how sinister the people at the top, the Bill Gates, the WHO, the people at Pfizer, the CDC, the FDA, all these people, the USDC, the CFIA, all these people are so deeply corroded in this disgusting rot. And as I stated, 20 years ago, there was a case of avian flu outbreak in Canada. 20 years ago. Did they go to this level? Did they go this extreme? Did they have to, force farms to surrender their businesses to the state? No. You know what they did? They actually did testing. They actually went and be medical professionals and did testing. They did follow-ups. They asked questions, which apparently we can't do now in 2025. Even though we have such great innovation, all this advancement, all this technology, all this wonder, but you can't ask questions. You can't follow up. You can't have a second opinion on things. You just got to go with the flow. That doesn't sound like progress to me. That doesn't sound like innovation. That sounds like we're going backwards. It sounds like something I would hear from, the dark ages of of medieval times. Go with the flow. Go with the kingdom. Shut up, get into line, and do what you're told. Unbelievable, ladies and here, this is what's leading to. I just want to show this. This is from last year. Governor signs disaster proclamation as officials order killing of 4.2 million chickens. I don't know exactly what state this is from. This was just a cutout from a post made here. Apparently, this is from the Western Journal. But that's what it's leading to. That's what's so concerning about this, that they're going to use this to push and push and push the goalpost to say it's no longer about, the animal safety. It's now your safety we got to be concerned, and we got to take control over you. Again, just like we saw with COVID, just like we saw with the pandemic lockdowns, all these legislations, all this, the WHO treaty that grants them permission to take over countries and their sovereignty, that's what's leading down to. And it's taking control of agriculture, which means it's taking control of your food, which means it's going to take control of you. This is evil to the next level. This is beyond comic book villainy. This is something that Lex Luthor couldn't even come up together. And this is happening for the sake of science and for the sake of health and for the sake of food safety. That we got to slaughter a bunch of ostriches that nobody consumes. Because, God forbid, scientists are doing experiments to see about natural immunity. A thing that's existed since the dawning of human beings. Oh my God, a person gets sick and then gets better. Wow, this phenomenon called natural immunity. This phenomenon called vitamin C. This phenomenon called going outside, exercising, sunlight. Holy crap. Who would have thought it?